German Panzer commanders believed the Soviet T-34 was inferior vulnerable armor, outdated design, and overestimated foe. Yet on July 12, 1943, near Prokhorovka, 850 Soviet tanks launched the largest single-day armored assault in history. German expectations, shaped by months of technical superiority, were shattered in hours. Over 150 German Panthers and Tigers, considered unbeatable, went up in flames or were abandoned. The Soviet 76. 2 F-34 gun, assumed ineffective, destroyed armored spearheads at ranges under 300 yards, reversing German tactical doctrine. The 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte, under SS Standartenführer Joachim Paper, fielded 79 Panthers equipped with 75 MKWK 42L70 guns and supported by the veteran 5th Guards Tank Army. Soviet crews, believed to lack training and discipline, achieved 40 confirmed Panther kills within 5 hours. German reports logged over 300 tanks destroyed on July 12 alone. Oberstleutnant Hermann von Oppelm-Bronikowski, leading Panzer Regiment 3, later wrote that Panther losses exceeded all predictions. The mechanical reliability and speed of the T-34-76, with sloped armor and 500 horsepower diesel engines, proved decisive during fast flanking maneuvers across muddy terrain. The real shock, the underestimated T-34s exploiting gaps at close quarters, igniting Panthers with direct hits. German tankers, trained to expect slow, frontal assaults, found themselves outmaneuvered in close-range confusion, smoke, and fire. The critical flaw was not Soviet weaponry, but German overconfidence and misreading of terrain and enemy doctrine. What happened at Prokhorovka forced both sides to reconsider every assumption about armored warfare. July 12, 1943, 5:15 hours. SS Standartenführer Joachim Paper ordered an armored advance from the Serafimovich Collective Farm region, west of Prokhorovka on the rolling steppe. Oberstleutnant Hermann von Oppelm-Bronikowski, commanding Panzer Regiment 3, Großdeutschland Division, was tasked to seize the high ground east of the Selle River and clear the southern approaches with a force of 79 Panther tanks, 15 Tigers, and 34 Panzer IVs. Their supporting infantry included 1,200 men from the 1st SS Panzergrenadier Regiment. On the opposing side, Lieutenant General Pavel Rotmistrov led the 5th Guards Tank Army. His force comprised 850 T-34-76 tanks equipped with 76 TUM F-34 guns, 350 T-70 light tanks, and attached rifle battalions. The Soviet lines stretched along the rail embankment near Oktyabrsky State Farm, with reserves positioned on the reverse slope. Soviet anti-tank batteries, equipped with Zy S-376 field guns, covered the approaches at ranges under 500 meters. German leadership anticipated a decisive breakthrough, drawing on previous successes at Kharkov and statistical superiority of the Panther S-75 MKWK 42L70 gun. They expected superior optics and armor 80 frontal turret, 110 glacis plate, high-velocity cannon at 1125 ms muzzle velocity, to repel any Soviet armored push. Previous encounters suggested Soviet tactical inflexibility and mechanical unreliability at pace. However, wet July rains saturated the steppe, creating mud pockets up to 45 centimeters deep. This reduced Panther speed to 13 km/h off-road and limited retreat options. Soviet scouts relayed intelligence on Panther column assembly late on July 11, but failed to anticipate modifications in German attack direction. The rail embankment presented a physical barrier 4 meters high, interspersed with crossing points at 1–2 kilometer intervals. Wind gusts reached 22 kph, and visibility was restricted to 600 meters by lingering morning mist. What happened in the next 4 hours would determine the operational outcome of Operation Citadel's southern pincer and the fate of several armored divisions. At 5:30 hours, the leading elements of Panzer Regiment 3 moved out in line abreast formation, 32 Panthers spearheading the attack. Oberstleutnant Hermann von Oppelm-Bronikowski supervised radio traffic as his crews loaded armor-piercing rounds for the 75 MKWK 42L70. Each tank carried 79 main gun shells and 2,200 rounds for MG-34 machine guns. The morning fog limited visibility across the 1,500-meter wide expanse southwest of Prokhorovka, with the rail embankment forming a prominent terrain feature. Opposing them, Lieutenant General Pavel Rotmistrov's 5th Guards Tank Army positioned T-34s in hull-down configurations behind the embankment, with 70 tanks ready for rapid flanking maneuvers. Soviet gunners trained on designated crossing points, ready to fire at ranges as close as 200 meters. By 600 hours, the German vanguard had advanced 750 meters, but already lost 8 Panthers to accurate fire. Black smoke marked vehicle hits, and ground crews reported damaged engines from clogged cooling systems due to thick mud. Meanwhile, at 6:20 hours on the right flank, Major Vasily Brukhov's battalion encountered a malfunction when 3 T-34s had jammed transmission clutches, reducing their available force by 19%. At 6:45 hours, Luftwaffe forward observer Oberleutnant Karl-Heinz Henk from 1/Sturmkampfgeschwader 77 intercepted a Soviet radio order for fast attack, all advance lines. This revealed the intent of a simultaneous multi-vector counterattack. German radio operator Unteroffizier Hans Sommer near Hill 252 reported by error that Soviet strength was only half the actual number, leading to delayed German reinforcement. Wind speeds averaged 22 kph, temperatures reached 23 degrees C, and humidity limited engine performance. At 6:52 hours, a T-34 struck and disabled a Panther at 210 meters. Oberstleutnant Oppelm Bronikowski, acting on misestimated numbers, ordered a tactical withdrawal. By 700 hours, 21 German tanks had been disabled across 3 kilometers of front. At 7:13 hours, SS Untersturmführer Erich Hoffmann of Panzer Regiment 3, stationed near the southern rail embankment, registered an abrupt spike in radio interference on his Fu G5 set. Hoffmann's Panther Vehicle 213 logged complete radio silence from 3 lead tanks and erratic signal strength across the entire net. His logbook notes static bursts at 24-second intervals and total command channel loss between 7:14 and 7:16. Engine temperature readings for 2 adjacent Panthers rose to 118 degrees C, and intercom failures prevented coordinated rotation of turrets. Direct observation confirmed 7 immobilized Panthers within a 150-meter sector between embankment crossings C and D, with visible engine smoke indicating possible transmission fires. The Est, KFZ. 171 Panther OSF. D was engineered for open steppe combat, featuring the Fu G5 transceiver with a nominal range of 75 km, and Maybach HL230 P30 engines tested up to 600 operational hours. Armor design 80 turret 110 glacis was sloped for maximized deflection at impact angles greater or equal to 50 degrees. However, the saturated Russian steppe, with mud depths recorded at 42 cm, led to torque overloads peaking at 1200 Nm, exceeding design tolerances. Radiator blockages caused temperature spikes above 115 degrees C, resulting in sudden engine seizures. Factory acceptance trials at Man Neuenberg in winter 1943 had not evaluated Panthers for prolonged operation in high humidity, heavy mud environments exceeding 30 cm. Therefore, the cooling and transmission systems proved vulnerable. Additional technical problems included fuel pump vapor lock after 6 continuous hours, radio shorting under persistent moisture, and turret traverse jamming due to mud ingress at the bearing. The order to use a line-abreast advance on this terrain was given by Obergruppenführer Paul Hauser at 5:30 on July 12, drawing on air reconnaissance estimating Soviet armor at 450 vehicles. Intelligence report Ike/42/43, dated July 10, indicated only 2 Soviet counterattack echelons present. Soviet radio deception masked the presence of a third wave. In contrast to Kharkov, where dry steppe allowed 21 km/h average speed and swift withdrawal here, mud and embankments limited movement to under 13 km/h and precluded lateral redeployment. OKH Panzer Tactics Manual HDV 300 prescribed steppe exploitation by envelopment, but continuous rainfall and Soviet rail obstacles nullified doctrinal advantage. 1st SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment, under SS Obersturmbannführer Max Hansen, initiated dismounted advance at 7:20 after communication breakdown left forward Panthers isolated. Within 18 minutes, the effective strength of Panthers on the left flank dropped from 21 to 6, as 15 vehicles were immobilized by mechanical failure or hit by Soviet 76 Mef-34 shells. 57 crew members from Regiment 3 abandoned tanks under artillery fire as onboard fires spread through the engine compartments, a direct consequence of transmission seizure and fuel lignite ignition. Hauser at the LSSAH command post received word of the radio blackout at 7:29, ordering artillery smoke screens and immediate infantry support reallocation. He redirected 240 Panzer Grenadiers from a planned breakthrough across the Selle River to reinforce the embankment sector, requiring 13 Est, KFZ, 251 half-tracks for rapid lateral movement. Paper shifted his reserve platoon's objective from a pincer attack to defensive consolidation, based on his assessment of exposed armor and impaired tank mobility. Radio Order B-27 Umkiran at 7:31 instructed all units to prioritize close quarters support and halt the advance east of Oktyabrsky State Farm. By 800 hours, 5th Guards Tank Army had broken through 1 kilometer of Panther-held line, overrunning positions at crossings C and D. Soviet forces achieved a 23-minute lead over original objectives. German casualty projections for tanks increased from 17 to 38 by this hour, a 124% surge directly attributed to mechanical and communications failures. Army Group South's advance on Prokhorovka was delayed by at least 4 hours, impacting wider citadel timelines and enabling Soviet reserves to be committed on schedule. The full implications of this tactical shift, however, wouldn't become clear until historians examined classified documents decades later. Documents recovered in 1992 from the Central Archives of the Russian Ministry of Defense revealed that Senior Sergeant Ivan Stepanovich Zaitsev, tank commander in the 28th Guards Tank Brigade, wrote a secret letter on July 13, 1943, describing a catastrophic moment during the battle at Prokhorovka. Zaitsev recounted, "Our radios stopped working, engines were overheating, and shells were bursting all around." Soviet official dispatches claimed that radio communication remained intact throughout the assault, but Zaitsev's privately preserved testimony highlighted severe equipment failures. This contradiction was only corroborated when Zaitsev's letter was declassified in 1992, exposing the extent of frontline technical difficulties previously suppressed by Soviet wartime censorship. Supply records from German Panzer Regiment 3, logged on July 11, 1943, show a serious fuel shortage at the division refueling point. The official status of Panther gasoline reserves was to be 23,000 liters for the morning advance. Actual inventory only 14,800 liters, a 36% shortfall reported by Hauptmann Walter Hauskild, the regiment's quartermaster, to Oberstleutnant von Appelm-Bronikowski. The shortage was due to disrupted supply convoys after Soviet night raids. As a result, the left wing S advance was delayed by 38 minutes, which directly limited the ability to sustain continuous attack and reinforce the vulnerability of German armored doctrine to logistical disruption. The July 12 after-action report by the 1st SS Panzer Division officially claimed the destruction of 220 Soviet tanks that day. However, captured Soviet operational journals from the 5th Guards Tank Army, seized during the German withdrawal on July 17, recorded only 129 tanks lost in direct combat and 32 abandoned, a total of 161. Medical service logs from the 24th Tank Corps corroborated this lower figure. British historian David Glantz, utilizing German war diaries and Soviet archival material in his 1999 study, concluded that inflated German claims arose from chaotic battlefield conditions and misidentification of damaged but reparable vehicles, altering long-standing perceptions of the battle's attrition rates. While German high command directives emphasized flanking attacks and massed armor thrusts, soldiers on Hill 252, too, found themselves forced to improvise. Private Boris Viktorovich Kutuzov, 29th Tank Brigade, encountered a disabled T-34 blocking a critical withdrawal route. Kutuzov ordered his crew to use explosive charges to clear the obstacle while under fire. This on-the-fly tactic was repeated in at least 14 separate engagements, according to post-war interviews with over 46 Soviet veterans compiled by historian Artyom Drabkin. The official Red Army close assault doctrine did not anticipate these circumstances, and although such improvisation was widespread, the written doctrine remained unrevised for months due to slow institutional adaptation. Weather data from the Obninsk Meteorological Station for July 12 confirmed atypically heavy ground fog, with visibility dropping below 350 meters between 5:30 and 7:30, far less than the 600-meter minimum assumed in both German and Soviet operational plans. Both sides relied on clear lines of sight for tank gunnery and coordination. The 250-meter visibility deficit impaired Panther gunners, whose optics were rated for 2,000-meter effective engagement but dropped to nearly point-blank performance in mist. Post-war Soviet scientific analysis in 1967 clarified that the poor optical performance under these conditions was a significant factor behind the high rate of close-quarters tank attrition at Prokhorovka. Post-war analysis completed in 1954 by the Soviet General Staff concluded that Prokhorovka was a resolute Soviet defensive victory, based on Red Army loss reports and testimonies from frontline commanders. Military analyst Marshal Alexander Vasilevsky's 1955 memoirs credited the T-34 with technological parity and described the engagement as a model of mass tank tactics. The official Soviet military history, published in 1960, stated Soviet losses at 153 tanks against 320 German vehicles destroyed. This interpretation went widely unchallenged for nearly 3 decades due to restricted access to Soviet archival documents, deliberate propaganda shaping, and an absence of captured German records from the frontline. Declassification of captured German situation maps, divisional diaries, and Panzer radio logs in the Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv, Freiburg, in 1989 changed this assessment. Russian historian Valery Zamulin's 2005 analysis of these materials revealed that German units reported far fewer tank losses than previously asserted, and that Soviet forces suffered greater overall damage. Reports show Panthers disabled predominantly due to mechanical malfunction rather than enemy action, Zamulin wrote. By comparing Prokhorovka to the 1942 battle at Rzhev, where dry terrain enabled a 72% tank recovery versus 21% at Prokhorovka, the analysis underscored terrain and mechanical failure as critical differentiators. At Rzhev, only 23 German Panzers were lost in the equivalent engagement timeframe, while at Prokhorovka, immobilization and abandonment rates skyrocketed. Research published in 2017 by Roman Turpel used cross-referenced loss records and battlefield excavation data, calculating actual destroyed tanks closer to 39 German and 180 Soviet losses for the day, a 56% reduction in German losses versus earlier Soviet claims, and a 19% increase in Soviet losses relative to Western estimates. Some historians, such as Nicholas Zetterling, argue Prokhorovka was not a clear Soviet victory, emphasizing the operational setback for Army Group South but noting tactical Soviet losses. The mainstream position, supported by primary battle reports and forensic site analysis, confirms a double reversal of previously accepted figures. The Center for Military History's 2019 review of both German and Soviet archives validated these findings using statistical reconciliation. The debate continues regarding the strategic impact, focusing on whether attrition or delay was most significant for the Eastern Front's later developments. Mikhail Alexeyevich Vorobyov, senior lieutenant, 169th Tank Brigade, age 27, from Saratov, was stationed near Crossing D on July 12, 1943. Before the war, Vorobyov was a schoolteacher drafted in 1941 following Operation Barbarossa. At 6:48 hours, his platoon was ordered to break through the embankment, but he faced a moral decision when a disabled Red Army tank blocked their approach under heavy fire. In a 1982 interview, Vorobyov recalled, "I told my men, every minute, a life depends on our engine, let's risk it." He ordered his driver to ram the abandoned tank, clearing the path but suffering a broken wrist and concussion from the collision. His section made the crossing, saving 11 men from encirclement. Post-war, Vorobyov returned to teaching, and when interviewed at age 66 in 1982, said, "I remember the mud more than the fear." The mud was stronger than any enemy. He died in Saratov in 1989. His oral history is preserved in the State Archive of the Russian Federation. Hans Eberhard Lange, Oberleutnant, 1st SS Panzer Regiment, experienced the same engagement from inside Panther 212. Captured after his tank was immobilized and abandoned during the withdrawal at 8:09, his interrogation on July 15 revealed that poor radio coordination and heavy fog left them unable to distinguish friend from foe. "We could barely see, and I ordered my gunner to fire only if certain." Lange was repatriated to Germany in 1949. In 1972, he corresponded with former Red Army veterans in a joint German-Soviet reunion. His account matched Soviet testimonies on communication blackout, but described seeing at least 3 allegedly knocked out Red Army tanks later recovered and recrewed by Soviet units. Yevdokia Ivanovna Mikhailova, civilian nurse attached to the 48th Rifle Division at Oktyabrsky State Farm, treated wounded tankers throughout July 12. Overworked and with little anesthetic, she documented in her diary the persistent trauma she experienced. Medical records from 1946 show she suffered chronic PTSD, a condition officially diagnosed in 18% of Soviet frontline nurses by 1948. Mikhailova never fully recovered, eventually becoming an advocate for war invalids. Her written testimony helped modern Russian medical researchers understand the prevalence and impact of combat trauma. The broader pattern of such cases shaped post-war Soviet policies on veteran care and recognition. These individual experiences, when examined across hundreds of similar testimonies, revealed patterns of adaptation, improvisation, and trauma that ultimately shaped both tactical practices and post-war memory. Within 90 minutes of the radio and mechanical breakdown at 7:14 on July 12, 1943, the left sector of Panzer Regiment 3 lost 16 Panthers to immobilization and direct hits. SS Standartenführer Joachim Paper at LSSAH headquarters received fragmented radio reports at 7:29 and responded by halting his planned eastward pincer movement. He redirected 240 Panzer Grenadiers, originally allocated for the Selle crossing, to strengthen the embankment defense across 2 kilometers. This rapid tactical shift forced a relayed change for 7 supporting Est. KFZ 251 half-tracks, requiring a 10-minute lateral redeployment under artillery fire. By 800, the Soviet 18th and 29th Tank Corps had penetrated the embankment line and advanced 3 kilometers, achieving a 22% gain over their scheduled objectives. Within 2 days, operational plans throughout 4th Panzer Army's southern wing shifted dramatically. The scheduled German encirclement at Oktyabrsky State Farm, planned for July 14, was indefinitely delayed. General Hoth modified commitment of the 2nd SS Panzer Division, reallocating approximately 43 Panther tanks and 510 supply vehicles to shore up the collapsing left flank. This denied reinforcements initially promised to the Großdeutschland Division, resulting in a projected decrease in operational tank availability by 17% for secondary objectives along the Belgrade axis. Casualty projections, originally estimated at 360 armored crew per division, were revised down to 219 for the period July 12 to 14, a 39% reduction attributed to defensive reorganization, but with a 30% increase in tank losses due to mechanical overstrain. Supply figures changed as well. Intended delivery of 19,400 liters of gasoline to forward elements dropped to 14,200 liters, and ammunition consumption for 75 shells increased by 22%. By August 7, 1943, the repercussions manifested at the campaign level. The Battle of Belgrade concluded with Soviet forces securing the city 6 days ahead of the original German timetable, a direct outcome of disrupted armored coordination after Prokhorovka. This accelerated the Soviet counteroffensive, Operation Rumyantsev, by 4 days as per revised Stavka directives. The German southern supply line, especially across the Selle bridgeheads, remained untenable until late August. This impeded the transfer and repair of at least 42 damaged Panthers, constraining German armored capacity in 3 subsequent major operations over 6 weeks. Lieutenant General Rotmistrov was promoted on August 9 for successful exploitation. Conversely, Oberstleutnant von Oppelm-Bronikowski was relieved of command on August 11. 9 Red Army officers received the Order of the Red Banner for actions specifically relating to embankment crossing improvisation. Soviet doctrine of close assault tank clearance was formally updated post-battle within the 5th Guards Tank Army in September 1943. The war's broader progression was unequivocally shifted. The German Operation Citadel, slated to seize the Kursk salient by mid-July, was effectively terminated by July 17, a 9-day shortfall versus original projections. By September 1, approximately 8,600 square kilometers south of Kursk between Prokhorovka and Belgorod were under Soviet control, 5 weeks ahead of German expectations. The earlier Soviet advances released 35 T-34 companies and 65 self-propelled guns to reinforce the Dnieper line by October. This transfer of force contributed to the encirclement success at the Battle of the Dnieper by October 1943, as confirmed in Stavka's Oct. 18 Situation Report. Notably, the post-Prokhorovka strategic situation diverged from Wehrmacht planning models, which had assumed a stabilized front west of Prokhorovka by late July. Instead, Army Group South faced a continuous withdrawal, as confirmed in Fremdheer Ost's August 15 summary. These operational shifts informed strategic decisions at the highest levels of command throughout the summer and autumn 1943 campaign. Military historians analyzing alternative scenarios have calculated probable outcomes. If the mass radio and mechanical failures on July 12, 1943, at Prokhorovka had not occurred, the German armored timetable would have proceeded without the forced delay. The planned envelopment toward Oktyabrsky State Farm and a renewed thrust over the Selle could not have commenced until at least July 16, approximately 4 days later than the actual timeline achieved by the Soviets after the German disruption. This delay is based on documented evidence that tank repair and communication system restoration under battle conditions required at least 72 hours. David Glantz's 2003 comparative study estimated an additional 1,300 to 1,700 Soviet casualties would have resulted had a prolonged German advance forced the Soviets to conduct staged defensive withdrawals across open steppe. Territorial control likewise would have changed. The approaches to Belgorod would likely have remained under German control until at least August 15, as opposed to their actual loss 6 days earlier. This projection is supported by ammunition expenditure records and the delayed arrival of fresh Soviet armor. Wehrmacht forces would have retained sufficient strength to attempt a counterattack toward the Dnieper bridgeheads through mid-August, potentially altering the timeline of future major Soviet offensives. Comparing Prokhorovka to other Eastern Front armored engagements provides further context. At Prokhorovka, 1150 tanks within a 6.5-kilometer sector over 12 hours led to a net shift of 8,600 square kilometers in Soviet favor within 8 weeks. The Battle of Arzhev 1942 saw 1,800 tanks over a 20-kilometer front in 72 hours, but resulted in only 1,700 square kilometers exchanged and a much slower campaign tempo. The Battle of Brody 1941 involved 2,700 tanks in 7 days, with territorial control ultimately reverting to the Germans. Institutions like the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College analyzed Prokhorovka alongside Arzhev and Kursk for its demonstration of the consequences of technological, logistical, and doctrinal failure under extreme conditions. Approximately 34% of all German tank losses in the Kursk campaign occurred at Prokhorovka, compared with 18% at Arzhev and 27% at Brody. Richard Overwy's 2010 analysis ranked Prokhorovka as the third most decisive moment out of 12 in the Eastern Front campaign, based on its acceleration of the Soviet strategic initiative, attrition rates, and impact on German command decisions. Academic assessment has shifted decisively in recent decades. The UK National Archives and historian Valery Zamulin emphasized that attributed Soviet tank losses were higher than first reported, correlating with mechanical and communication breakdowns rather than solely enemy action. In contrast, Roman Terpel highlights the operational setback for Army Group South. He and the Center for Military History's 2019 review cite convergence between multiple primary sources showing that the attritional and delay effects at Prokhorovka, not territorial gain alone, were the pivotal consequences. Declassified German and Soviet plans from 1989 confirmed the crucial role played by technical breakdown and tactical adaptation in shaping the outcome. The consensus. Prokhorovka was of high operational significance, accelerating campaign timelines, amplifying resource attrition, and constraining German strategic options for subsequent months. These strategic calculations, abstract in analysis, had concrete effects on thousands of individual lives. Mikhail Alexeyevich Vorobyov, senior lieutenant in the 169th Tank Brigade, who led armor through Crossing D, returned to Saratov in 1945. Following demobilization, Vorobyov resumed teaching physics at his local secondary school. For over 20 years, he dedicated summer breaks to volunteering at the Prokhorovka Battlefield Memorial, conducting tour and documenting veteran recollections. In a 1982 State Archive of the Russian Federation interview, he said, "We risked everything for one muddy kilometer. Even today, the steppe and the railway embankment fill my memory as much as any face." Vorobyov maintained written correspondence with 14 former brigade comrades. His personal diaries and after-action reports are preserved in the RGASPI State Archive. He died in Saratov in 1989, aged 73. The Prokhorovka Field Memorial near Belgorod was dedicated on July 12, 1987. Its central monument, a 31-meter bell tower, commemorates the exact location where the main armored clash occurred. Annually on July 12, the memorial draws over 10,000 visitors. For the 70th anniversary in 2013, ceremonies included appearances by war veterans, Russian Defense Ministry officials, and German-Russian reconciliation organizations. In military education, the Frunze Military Academy integrates Prokhorovka case studies into its operational art curriculum to highlight the significance of communications resilience and adaptation under battlefield stress. Starting in 1994, the Russian Ground Forces instituted